Ja, hallo und herzlich willkommen zu DiEMTV, dem deutschen Format der europäischen Bewegung DiEM25. Mein Name ist Katharina Prehn und ich spreche heute mit Lucas Febraro. Und wir werden gemeinsam über die Arbeit bei Lieferservices wie Lieferando, Deliveroo und Co. sprechen. Die sind ja eigentlich seit einigen Jahren ziemlich häufig anzutreffen in den Städten, also vor allen Dingen in den Städten in Deutschland. Und es gibt auch immer mehr und mehr Geschäftsstellen von Flink und Gorillas, die irgendwie in den Erdgeschossen aufploppen. Genau. Und wir wollen heute darüber sprechen, wie es ist, für Lieferando vor allen Dingen zu arbeiten und für jeder. Lucas hat selbst von 2016 bis 2019 für beide Firmen gearbeitet, ist nebenbei eigentlich noch Communications Coordinator bei DiEM25, wohnt in Berlin und kommt aber gebürtig aus Brasilien. Und deshalb gibt es heute quasi eine kleine Besonderheit, weil wir das Ganze jetzt auf Englisch weiterführen werden. Wir werden das Ganze schlussendlich übersetzen, sodass wir Untertitel haben und jeder, der mag, auch auf Deutsch das Interview noch verfolgen kann. Aber von hier an wird es jetzt erstmal weitergehen auf Englisch. So, yeah, hello. Nice to have you here, Lucas. I just started to introduce you a little bit, that you live in Berlin or are based there usually, or originally from Brazil, and that you worked for Lieferando and I think for Foodora as well. But yeah, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit and explain us like how what brought you to Berlin and how you ended up working for Lieferando.
Thanks, Katharina, and thanks for the invite. Happy to be here. Yeah, I mean, you already did a pretty good job with the basics. So I come from Brazil originally, and I live in Berlin. I've been living in Berlin since 2014. I came to Berlin originally from Brasilia, from my hometown, and it was just, well, I was making music at the time, and I was trying to have a career as a musician and music producer. So it was the usual cliche, basically, you know, just a music producer moves to Berlin and try to make it. My girlfriend at the time, she's an European citizen, so we moved together here and sort of got married so that I could stay. And so I found it hard to make a living out of music, and then eventually I had to get a job, basically, just to pay the bills. And that was the thing that seemed to be the easiest to get into, the sort of doing that sort of work, making deliveries. You just need a bike, you just need a phone, and then it's a very short onboarding process, and then you can work. It's flexible work, so that's another thing that attracted me, but not only me, attracts a lot of people to it. Things are changing a little bit on that end, and we can talk about that. But those were the main attractors, basically. The fact that it's flexible work, that you can get into it quite easily, and also something that's also quite important that also attracts a lot of other people is that you don't have to speak fluent German. So there's so many immigrants here in Berlin, of course, and one of the main barriers in the labor market for a lot of them is that they don't have full command of German. So something like that is tailored specifically to that type of people as well. If you look at ads on the street or on the internet for prospective riders, many of them, even the majority of them, probably are in English instead of being in German. So that was another thing as well that attracted me to it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about that, like more about your colleagues. How did they came to this job? You just mentioned it, but like where did they mainly come from when you say everything is in, or most of the ads are in English? And how did they, do you maybe know how did they come to the job? Was it the same way?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, so there isn't, of course, with that type of work, specifically talking about food delivery. If it's grocery delivery, is a bit different. But with food delivery, there isn't a workplace per se. So it's hard to sort of really get to know your colleagues and mingle with them. If you work in the same areas, you might see, and during the same times as well, you might see each other a lot. But again, those are very sort of transient sort of meetings while you're waiting for delivery. You have a short chat with them. So it's hard to say, but to the best of my ability, to what I can remember seeing and sort of what I experienced, the people that I encountered, a lot of them tend to come from Southeast Asia. A lot of them come from Latin America as well, like I did. So yeah, I think there's a lot of Indians and Pakistanis and people who come from Bangladesh, and Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Mexico. Some come from other European countries as well. But really, I would say that the majority of people that I encountered were immigrants rather than Germans. And also a lot of them were students. So that's another, a lot of people who come here on exchange programs to Germany, to Berlin. I mean, I think that's a large percentage of people who work in those companies that tend to be students as well.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe then it's hard to say, because you just said that it's hard to meet people and hard to just have an easy conversation. But then maybe you can describe it for yourself. How did an average working day for you look like? Or did you, if you had an average working day?
So it's very simple, really. So basically, and it varies from company to company, but at least in those days with Foodora, I technically only worked for the same company for this whole time, Foodora, but Foodora was acquired in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, or in 2018 by Lieferando. So then I sort of started wearing Lieferando colors, but I was basically still a Foodora employee. And with Foodora, the way it worked was they didn't provide you with bikes really, or with really anything. Even the backpacks, they could give you one, but you needed to leave a deposit with them for the equipment in general. So there's 100 euros that they sort of retain from you for the equipment in case you don't give it back after you leave. So usually at the very beginning, you went to one of their, I forgot what they call them, but basically small offices that they have for riders, where you can go and then you can get the equipment. You can get a backpack, and you can get a jacket or a shirt or whatever. And then from there, you can start your shifts if you are working in that area. If not, then you have to ride to there are starting points basically in each neighborhood where you can start a shift. You can just start from anywhere. And then if you don't live inside a starting point, you have to ride to a starting point, and then there you sort of open the app and press the button saying that you're online, and then you start to get orders basically. And then you go to a restaurant, and then you deliver the food, and then usually you get a next order in the area where you already are at. So it's kind of unpredictable where you're gonna end up. The zones are sort of there are borders basically, but at least at first with Lieferando there wasn't. So with Lieferando, for example, you could start a shift at a particular neighborhood and end up completely on the other side of town, and then have to sort of take the train to get back home. And yeah, that time is unpaid, of course. Sometimes it would take like 45 minutes to get back home. So yeah, but basically it's just to summarize very simply, you just open the app and you tap on start shift, and as long as you're in one of the designated areas, you have your equipment, you can start.
Okay. And for how many hours did you work? Did you have an average amount of hours that you worked, and how many rides did you have during one shift?
So it was I had MIDI job contract. So it was anything from, I think 15 hours per week was sort of the minimum that was required in my contract. And then I could get that up to 30 or 35 and it would be okay. So it's kind of up to you in a sense. If you work full time, then it's not up to you. You need to work 40 hours a week. You have some liberty to decide how you're going to distribute those hours, but you need to fulfill them. And obviously, if you have a mini job, then you can't go over the maximum of, I believe, 10 hours a week or something like that. And then, so I average about 20 hours a week, to answer to your question. And regarding the usual sort of shifts, if it's busy in an hour, you can do 3, maybe even 4 deliveries. If you get lucky and you get short ones, it depends on the distance as well. But there are also days where, you know, you can work for 4 hours, 5 hours and get 1 delivery, 2 deliveries. So it's very unpredictable in a way, but it's predictable in the sense that if you work at night and on the weekends, then it's very unlikely that you're just going to be standing around with nothing to do. Those are the busiest times. If it's the middle of the day on a Tuesday and it's winter and it's sunny and everybody's going out, then you're not going to have a lot to do probably.
Mm-hmm. And like, what was your wage for like 1 shift? How was it paid?
So you get paid with Foodora, you got paid by the hour because you had an actual employment contract. The salary was just about minimum wage, a little bit above, maybe like 25 cents above minimum wage or something like that. And after the first year working with them, I got an awesome raise of like an additional like 20 cents per hour or something like that. And then the raises stop. So if you stay other years, there's no raises anymore. But at the time, Deliveroo was also in the German market, and Deliveroo did not actually employ riders. So everybody works on a freelance basis. So then you get paid by delivery. I believe they got paid around $4.50 per delivery or something like that.
Okay. When you said like, yeah, you can work as much hours as you want, and it's quite flexible, but yeah, it needs to be organized somehow. How was it organized, and who like planned the shifts, for example? Like, yeah.
So there's those companies, I think to this day, probably all of them do that. They have an online shift scheduling tool, either a third party, as it was with Foodora, or proprietary, as it was with Lieferando. So Lieferando has its own thing contained on their own app. But basically, there's an algorithm there's a system that you tell the system when are you unavailable. So which days and times of the week, of the next week, the following week, are you going to be unavailable? And then it assigns you shifts depending on how many hours you work on your contract. It's going to assign you a number of shifts during the times where you said that you were available. So if back in the day, again, if I said that I wasn't going to be available on Saturday night next week, for example, then I knew that I wasn't going to be assigned shifts from the time frames that I chose. But then outside of that, you know, Saturday afternoon, for example, I might get a shift, but you just don't know. There's usually the next week's schedule was published like on Thursday the week prior. So it would be on Thursday that you kind of know what shifts you have. And then it varies from company to company and also from period to period, how flexible they are in letting you drop a shift that you already assigned. So when I started out, it was very easy. Actually, you just 48 hours in advance. If you just told them that you weren't be available for a shift, they would just erase it. But then after that, they became a little bit more strict. So you needed to find another rider to cover for you if you couldn't do a shift that you were assigned. Otherwise, you would get a strike, and then you know the usual German strike system: 3 strikes and you're fired. So yeah, that was it more or less.
Okay, which like is it then easy to find someone if you don't really know your colleagues, because like sounds
yeah, it's so actually in the shift planning platform, when I first started out with Foodora in 2016, they actually had like a chat function, so you could actually chat with people, and there'll be people offering shifts there all the time to see if somebody wanted to pick it up. And then they stopped doing that, I think, because yeah, they probably realized that it was a stupid idea to provide a platform for riders to sort of get together and exchange ideas like that. It could get very dangerous very fast. And so that wasn't the case anymore. So I think, I don't quite remember, to be honest, but then I think you just had to have contacts. You just had to be like in a WhatsApp group chat of riders, for example, which a lot of people were. And then you could offer shifts there and pick up shifts as well if you wanted to. Yeah, that was basically it.
Okay. Like, we will talk about this giving workers a platform, how to organize themselves a little bit later. But yeah, let's go first back to another point that you just mentioned, that it was so easy to enter because you just you just need a phone and a bike. But so then I guess it was your own bike, because what I just noticed now here, I live in Hamburg, and lots of, I think it was mainly Gorillas, they used the swap feeds bike, the one with the blue wheel. At least I saw lots of people driving those bikes. Like, if you were the one who organized like the equipment, it was you, I guess, who paid for it in the end, isn't it? And like, what, I mean, if you use your bike quite often and it's normal that it breaks at a certain point, who then paid for those costs that you had? Because yeah, you need to work, because if you do just a 9-to-5 job in the office, usually, like, depends, but usually, yeah, you get the equipment, and if something breaks, then someone will care for it.
Yeah, it was a point of contention, and it still is, for people who do that type of work, who covers for those repair costs. When I started out, it was our responsibility to do it. It was the rider's responsibility. They didn't give you any assistance whatsoever in that area. And then it's the riders sort of started demanding that, trying to organize a little bit, and that was one of the demands, that they cover for bike repairs, because really, your bike just starts breaking left and right after you do this job for a while. It destroys it, and so I think on average people had to spend at least 30, 50, 60 euros a month just with bike repairs. So Foodora, eventually they negotiated with the riders, and then we started getting a very tiny amount of money for every kilometer that we rode on shifts, because they record that, obviously. And so at the end of the month, those like small, like, fractions of an euro would sort of add up, and then you get credit with a company that they sign a contract with, a bike repair company, like a startup of sorts. And so in my case, for example, usually every month I would accumulate like 20 to 30 euros, I think, of credit with that partner that they had. And then they had a workshop here in Berlin where if you needed repairs, you could go, and then you could use that credit to pay for the repairs. If it went above it, then you have to cover it out of your own pockets still, of course. But it was an improvement, basically, that we got from making that demand. Whereas with the Deliveroo, I don't think they ever did anything. I think that demand was also brought up by Deliveroo riders, but yeah, I don't really think they accepted just any responsibility whatsoever for repairs.
Mm-hmm. And like, how about, you said that lots of people who worked there were students from somewhere abroad. So I guess quite young people, but like, what happens if you just like can't work for a day because you're sick or something? I don't know, like, you can't work for a little longer maybe. And I don't know if those people are quite young, maybe no one thinks about it, but it's planned like to be a job that you just don't do forever because you also can't do it forever. What would you say?
Yeah, of course. So if you're an employee, then if you get a sick note, then they can't force you to work, and they have to pay you. If it's just a short-term thing, of course, you're just ill or something like that. They do also have accident insurance. I know that, but I don't really know, to be honest. I can't really speak of how effective it is and what the conditions are, because luckily I never had to use it. But you get covered sick pay because they have to legally. Whereas with again with Deliveroo at the time, then because you're a freelancer, then there's no such guarantee. So if you got sick, then too bad. I don't know. Maybe they were human enough that they would at least let you drop your shift and not punish you for it, but they wouldn't give you sick pay or anything.
Okay. Yeah, but like strange information anyway. But how you just said about the organization of the workers, like they shut down the platform to exchange and just, I don't know, change shifts and talk with each other. And we now see that the Gorillas workers started to organize themselves, but like it sounded that it was not really welcome that you have a platform to exchange, and maybe also not really welcomed to be organized in a certain way, because it's not thought like this, like the concept is not planned to meet someone. How was it for you? Like, was there any kind of organization of employees? And if there was, to just explain it a little bit, what was the reaction then?
So in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, or even already as early as 2016, late 2016, some riders did start trying to organize together with FAU, the union. So some of the riders who were FAU members then started to sort of try to recruit the riders to basically form a union. And I took part in that, in the sense that I went to some of the actions, I went to the protests. There was one that was quite big that took place in front of the Foodora and the Deliveroo headquarters, I think in the summer of 2017. And some things were achieved from that effort. Like I mentioned, the money for the repair costs, that that system that Foodora started implementing, that came out of pressure coming from that organization effort. But obviously, management was quite hostile to it. They didn't really want to. They didn't want to have a union involved, unsurprisingly. Deliveroo especially was extremely hostile to it. I don't even know if they ever actually sat down, even informally, to talk to the riders and to any sort of union representatives. And as far as Lieferando, because at the time, of course, Foodora and Lieferando were separate companies. Strangely, Lieferando riders were never really involved. It was mostly just Foodora and Deliveroo riders. I don't know why. There was just Deliveroo and Foodora riders seem to be sort of part of the same community, whereas Lieferando riders were not. It was more of a sort of a traditional delivery company, in the sense that it didn't really tailor so much to English-speaking people, I think, and so there was maybe a cultural barrier there. I don't know, but the fact was that they were never particularly involved. But yeah, some things came out of it, but as a whole, the effort failed, in the sense that not a lot of workers joined the union at all. It was a very small amount of them, and some of the reasons for that, as you can imagine, and that you already touched upon, are that it's transitory work. So most people don't plan on staying on for a long time. So there isn't much of a motivation to try to organize and to try to win rights. There wasn't really a workplace where, like a space where workers could really talk and get to know each other. Obviously, something else that hinders that effort a lot. And also the fact that a lot of them were students or immigrants, like not only did they not expect to stay in that job for a long time, but a lot of them probably didn't even expect to to be in Germany for a long time. So, you know, there's just not a lot of the time and the effort that it takes to organize, and the risk as well is just, it wasn't worth it for a lot of riders, I think.
Yeah, but what we also see about these kind of service jobs, if you want to say it like this, is that this kind of business models just work maybe because also the worker don't stay that long, they don't organize themselves, and they are like really poorly paid. This is why it all works out in the end. And we now see, I don't know if you can compare it or not, but we see that at Gorillas, they say that sometimes they were not paid, or they were not paid the right amount of money. How were, like, what kind of experience do you have? Like, was it somehow like comparable or not at all?
Yeah, so I think in my final 6 months or so with Foodora, then already Lieferando, it was a disaster. It just the paychecks were wrong every single month, and they just couldn't fix it, basically. So with me, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that dramatic. In fact, I think in a month or two, my paycheck might have been wrong, but by like they gave me more money than they should have. But for a lot of riders, yeah, it was what we're seeing now with Gorillas. It's an old story, basically. So I remember that a lot of people weren't getting paid by 400, 500 euros, which obviously, if you're doing that type of work, 99% of the people are living paycheck to paycheck. So if your paycheck is wrong by that amount, it just means that you can't pay rent. In fact, I think in WhatsApp groups and things like that, there might have been a couple of stories of people who were just facing eviction in their apartments because their pay slips were wrong and they just wouldn't correct it month after month. So I think eventually they sorted it out in that particular occasion, but it's still something that happens quite often. I don't know why. I don't know why it keeps happening, but it does. Okay,
so you have to ask for it again and again and again, which also takes lots of effort, I guess, in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that shocks me is that there are no repercussions. So I'm not super familiar with German law in that area, but it just shocks me that, I mean, if you don't show up for work, there are repercussions, pretty quickly. But if you don't get paid, then it's just, I'm sorry, we'll try to do better next month. And then next month, it's still wrong. And when they eventually do correct everything, you don't get a bonus for your troubles, for the stress that you went through, anything like that. Nothing like that. So yeah, it's quite shocking to me.
Like the perspective maybe from the other side, because you said like you don't plan to work in this job for forever, and still you have lots of struggle in your everyday life, but maybe it's not, or I think it was not really part of the discussion here in Germany, since maybe, like sometimes it popped up in the media, but it was basically not a discussion. Also because those services, they're just offered mainly in the city. So it's more like you get to think about maybe what kind of like conditions is it to work in such a job. But what would you say? How was the job of you and your colleagues perceived? And did you feel somehow like represented, and I don't know, like someone like cared and was interested in like your like daily struggles with working for such
You mean by people, or by society as a whole, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. It's not very good. It's to be honest, I think one of the worst parts of doing any type of low-level work. You know, not at all just talking about delivering food with your bike here, but just anything, you know, servers, cleaners, anything like that, is just how the contempt with which a lot of people look at you, you know, like you're not kind of there almost. A lot of people just, to mention some very mild examples, it can get a lot worse than that, especially in other lines of work. But, you know, because you're going around the streets wearing those kind of ridiculous colors that all those startups have, a lot of people will just mess with you, you know, like you're a bit of a clown, especially if it's the weekend and there's a lot of drunk people around. People at restaurants, especially management, they kind of treat you like crap sometimes. Some of them are really nice, but some of them, you know, are not. Some people at restaurants won't even let you wait for an order inside, even if it's winter and it's freezing outside. They'll ask you to stay outside so that you don't ruin the experience for the people who are at the restaurant. The customer as well. Sometimes they're not particularly thoughtful in terms of realizing that it's a human being that they're sort of paying to deliver the food, basically. So yeah, again, sometimes there's a lot of you have to go through a lot to sort of to make the delivery for them, especially if the weather is horrible, things like that, unsafe conditions. But a lot of them will still be mad that the food was late or something like that, and they won't tip because of it. In office buildings, the people at the reception are quite often also not very nice to you. So it's, you know, there's obviously there's the financial aspect of it. The work is hard because it's physical work, but also that aspect of it is very unpleasant.
Do you have an idea about like how to change it, and do you think that there is a chance to like make people more aware of it? What can be, like, what are your ideas? What could be a solution?
That's a tough question. I think those types of people who do that type of work need to be more seen. Of course, people need to realize that, you know, they're also human beings, and the work that they do in a lot of ways is real work. You know, it's the thing that keeps society ticking, as opposed to the huge amount of complete bullshit desk jobs that we have nowadays that are very well paid and that make no difference to the world. But, you know, if all of the advertisement, you know, marketing consultants and people like that, they disappeared overnight, I don't think a lot of people would be able to tell the difference. Maybe they would, but just, you know, for the better. But if cleaners disappeared overnight, then you would notice it immediately. So I think that consciousness needs to be developed. How to develop it? Well, that's a difficult question. You know, it's a lot of things. There isn't a magic bullet for it. If there is, I would very much like to find it. But as far as I know, there isn't. So it's just something that we need to, especially us as progressives that are in sort of the business of political organizing, that's something that we need to think about very hard and to try to accomplish.
Like, to just keep on talking about this topic, when I discuss it with some people, I don't know, random people somewhere, and you just see someone, because it's very visible, as you say, like where walking around in orange is usually not really, it's not really easy to not see someone. And like, sometimes when you discuss it, then people say, okay, but when there's a demand, there should be a service, no matter under how conditions, but because there is a demand, so you can like somehow build a business around that. Like, first question, maybe, would you agree on that? And the second question is maybe more related to the program that we just wrote for like DiEMTV to or our idea was in the end to enable municipalities to develop those kind of platforms, or to start making those kind of copies from platforms like Uber as well, or like Lieferando, Deliveroo, I don't know, Airbnb, no matter what. And the idea is also to say, okay, in the broad of those platform copies, there should be people from, or elected people from the municipalities, and also elected representatives from the people that are actually working in those businesses that are doing this job. What are your ideas about that? Would you think that this is maybe a solution how you can at least do something to just give people a voice and to start to organize it differently, but with offering a service that is that they're which is like demanded? And or do you say, okay, no, maybe just not, because you can't offer the service in a fair way? Maybe. What are your ideas?
You know, I think one of the most interesting aspects about those types of platforms, food delivery, grocery delivery, you know, it's a bit of a tricky situation, but also ride sharing apps, things like that, is that how easy it is theoretically to sort of flip them and turn them into like a semi techno-communist utopia, basically. Because if you just remove those those VC funded horrible profit-seeking companies, then what you have here basically is like technology at its best. Really, it's an app that sort of provides a service that's a valuable service that a lot of people are happy to do. Actually, a lot of people who do that type of work, they like it, they really love it. It's you could do a lot worse these days, I think, in terms of just the nature of the work, than getting paid to cycle on the streets, And so it's the other things that come with it that are very unpleasant. But if you remove that sort of profit-seeking element of it, the exploitation element of it, and if you empower workers to own the platform and to have control over their workplace, basically, then all of a sudden you have something almost utopic. You have something that it's quite attractive, really, and that people don't need to feel bad for using. How to accomplish that? It's another matter. I know that there's been a lot of discussions. A lot of people have had this idea already of turning services like Uber and like Deliveroo into basically worker-owned collectives, and I think that's a very interesting idea. The option that you just mentioned, which would be something more centered on the municipality with elected officials sort of guiding the process. To be honest, I hadn't really considered it, but it's something else that sounds interesting. Regardless of what sort of route you choose to take, anything is more desirable than what we currently have. But I understand, what people need to understand as well is that the vast majority of people, when we criticize those companies, we're not saying that we're not being Luddites. We don't want to retreat to a period in which those things didn't happen. We don't want to say that technology is bad, that it needs to be that way. On the contrary, technology is amazing. I think technology is wonderful, and we need to use it, and we need to encourage it every step of the way. Is the exploitation things that are sort of embedded in it that we need to get rid of. But if you're able to do that, then I think we can have our cake and eat it too. Basically, we can still have the technology, we can still have the comfort of having things delivered to our place, and of hailing, having like a fleet of cars that sort of can take you anywhere. Environmental questions aside, but it's one thing doesn't exclude the other. Basically, we can have both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the idea that you said, technology and in general, it's good, and you can use it for good, and you can think about it differently, but you need to think about it differently and say, okay, this is my service, and you have to erase those kind of you have to erase the exploitation of it. But because sometimes I think it's really weird that you say then, okay, no, but we don't want this in general, and then you push everything away. But yeah, I like that you said, okay, we will somehow we try how to use it better, which I think is really good. But because it offers another possibility about how to talk about it. But yeah, what do you think? Like, do you think that there is somehow the possibility to like maybe inform people and to speak more about those parts, to like better explain what is the problem actually? What are your ideas on that?
Yeah, of course. I think it has to be a well thought out communications efforts, and you know, I think, I don't know if they're still operational, but there is even a worker-owned platform for food delivery here in Berlin, or there was, at least. To be honest, I don't know much about them. They're quite small still, unsurprisingly, but they've put into practice, basically. They're trying to make a workers' own version of Deliveroo. And I think it's totally achievable. You know, I think it's as a message, it's way easier to transmit than, you know, all those things are bad. They're intrinsically bad, and we need to get rid of them. And, you know, you can, if you want to be a good person, you can have food delivered to your house. You can have groceries delivered to your house. You can do anything like that. That's a much more difficult message to transmit effectively and to convince people of. But if the message is, look, those things are good, they make our lives easier, and that's why they're so popular, and we understand that. What we need to do is we need to democratize it. We can keep it. You know, the technology is great, but the people who are actually doing the service for you, they're being exploited heavily. And so we need to push so that those people have fair pay, they have fair working conditions. And then, you know, and then everybody's happy, basically, apart from the capitalists who don't get to profit out of those people's backs, literally.
Yeah, nice. Like, maybe because this is a final question, just to have this as a closing word, also still in the year, like, to know what brought you to DiEM, and like, was the experience that you had at Lieferando and put our reason, and will you bring this to like your work here at DiEM?
So to answer the first part of the question, no, it wasn't really a direct sort of consequence of me having done that type of work. Before I did that, when DiEM was founded, I had already heard about DiEM. I followed the Greek debt crisis in 2015 very closely, and I participated in protests here in Berlin, supporting the Syriza government, you know, back in the days where it was cool to do that. And then obviously everything fell apart, and I was very interested when I heard that DiEM was being founded by Yanis Varoufakis and Srečko. And then I just, for whatever reason, I never joined DiEM, just because I wasn't very politically, you know, I was interested, but I wasn't very active politically at the time. And then I joined DiEM at the start of this year, but it wasn't for those reasons, basically. Having said that, I do think that this is maybe the experience that I've had in my life that is most useful, in the sense of figuring out how we can communicate better at DiEM, how we can formulate policy better, how we can sort of reach out to those people, you know, to the people doing the dirty work of our lives for us, basically, and how we can convince them, how we can appeal to them, how we can inspire them, and then hopefully build a very powerful movement all across Europe that way.
Yeah, thanks. It was, I think, really nice closing words. Thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure to talk to you and get your insights and your ideas about what you can do, what is it as a service, and what you can do and how you can maybe develop or transform it. And yeah, maybe we can discuss again later on in different topics. Yeah, thanks a lot for being here.
I'll be happy to. Thanks for the invite again, Katarina. That was really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and for like everyone who's watching this video, continue watching and please join us on our channel. Join us at DiEMTV. We're really happy to have everyone who's interested and who would like to work on progressive ideas and movements. And yeah, see you in 2 weeks, I would say. Bye.